Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a creamy tortellini soup with Italian sausage, some veggies, and a kind of a creamy tomato broth. We're going to whip up some apple butter, which will be eventually ready tonight because it has to slow cook for a while, but we're going to get the base start on it. And then we're going to make an Italian melt to kind of go with our soup because soup and sandwiches are a happy friend. But let's start on our soup. We're going to dice up our onion and start it to sauteing it. We're going to let it saute for a few minutes, and then we will throw in our Italian sausage to start to cook up for it. So I've just got one big yellow onion here. I'm just going to take off this whole kind of top layer. And we're going to just do a good size dice on it and let it start to saute. And then we'll start working on our apples for our apple butter. Here we go. Because tonight I'm going to bake up a cinnamon roll sourdough. And I think hot apple butter will be wonderful with it. And actually, I also say it's not just cinnamon roll. I did pumpkin spice in it too. So it's like a cinnamon swirl, pumpkin spice swirl sourdough, which again, apple butter will be delicious. Okay, forgot my olive oil. Let me grab my olive oil real quick. We're going to do a quick little drizzle in here. I've got my Dutch oven heating up. Just about, like a teaspoon and a half. Just a smidge of it, enough to start sauteing our veggies. And we'll get them going. I'll give them a quick stir. And then I'll wash my hands before I touch the apples because otherwise I'll get onion flavor on the apples. So let's give a quick stir to kind of coat these onions up with our olive oil. Now let's just get a little bit of that apple flavor off. So I already pre-started peeling and chopping up some of my onions just to kind of take out the time. So I've got three apples in there already that I have peeled and diced for it, just because that's there's a lot of monotony in peeling in them. But these are our Jonathan apples from the apple orchard. I still have a good amount left. We've been using apples like every single day. But this will be, I'm not making a super huge batch of apple butter, but a good amount for us to eat with our rolls and hopefully have a little bit left over. Although I have a feeling that Teddy is going to actually love the apple butter and just eat it like applesauce. Okay, so we're going to peel and core all of our apples. And then what we'll do is we'll start cooking them up in our little Dutch oven here with a little bit of apple cider, lemon juice, sugar, and cinnamon. And once they get nice and tender, we will puree them. And then we'll put them back in the pot and we will continue to reduce them until we have this really thick butter-like consistency or sauce-like, really thick, denser sauce for it. And that's your apple butter. I'm going to do a cinnamon spice to it with brown sugar because I like the caramely flavor that the brown sugar is going to use. And then a lot of people, when they make apple butter, they'll use water to kind of help with the kind of cooking it up. I'm going to actually use some apple cider, which is going to give it a much more vibrant flavor, give you more of that apple kick to it. Okay, so let's get these peeled off. And again, you want to take the peel off of this because otherwise you'll have a really gritty apple butter, which won't be as nice because your skins do not reduce or get soft and tender. Okay, let me give my onions a quick stir over here. Here we go. You can smell them cooking up there. The smell of, I will say, onions and garlic. Whenever I cook those things, all my kids are like, oh, it smells so good. What are you cooking? And I'm like, it's just the onions. But they always make the house smell wonderful. Okay. And get these last ones. And if you could always just like leave them quartered or whole things. You just have to cook them a little bit longer. Chopping them up a little bit smaller will help you get done with that part of the process of making apple butter first. So that's why we're going to start it there because I hope to have these nice and soft and well enough for us to get them pureed and start the reducing process on here. And that way, and it won't only take after we puree it, it can take up to an hour to reduce it down because you simmer it on low, but it'll be ready for dinner tonight, which I think will be perfect. There we go. So again, just kind of a coarse chop. Nothing too fancy, just going to help it cook up a little bit faster. Okay, we've got all of our apples here. I'm going to add these with the other 3 that I had already chopped up and peeled.
You have a question? Is there any recipe that you're not required to peel the apples?
With apples, you can always opt not to peel them. It's just going to change your texture. So if you don't mind the grit or having little flakes in it, then you can always leave them unpeeled. But for most things, apples, unless you're doing one of those baked apples where you then scoop it out and eat it, most of them require you to peel it just because that skin doesn't get tender. I'm going to put in about a cup of, maybe 2/3 a cup of apple cider for this. And then we're going to use about, I want to say, a good teaspoon of cinnamon. Now, you got to be careful with the spices. You don't want to go over crazy with the spices because remember, everything is going to reduce down to a smaller amount. So while it looks big here, I'll have a lot smaller there. So around a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon, but don't go even more with it. And we're going to add in our brown sugar, and we are going to want about a cup of brown sugar for this. So I've got 1/4 of a cup. I'm not going to really pack it down. I'm just going to keep it loose, but I'll just kind of fill it up a little bit higher. So that's 3, 4. So we've got about a cup of brown sugar in here. That's going to help make the butter, the sweetness of it. You got to think jams and stuff like that typically have a lot more sugar in it because they are, what sweeten it up. You don't eat them in large amounts. Now I say that, I'm sure my husband and Teddy will be spooning it in their mouths. Okay. So we're going to let this kind of sit there. I'll let it start to steam up. These apples will reduce down and all of this will get a lot smaller here. Okay. And do I even have it on? Now let me turn this guy on and we're going to let it start to cook. Once I've gotten it reduced down, we're going to add in the juice from a lemon, but I want it to kind of cook up just a little bit first. Well, thank you, Ashley. We really appreciate that. Okay, I've got my onions here. They're starting to get a little bit translucent, kind of getting into the nice caramelization texture for it, but we want to make sure it gets fully there. So for our soup today, we've got our onions, we've got zucchini and green onions, mushrooms, Italian sausage, tortellini, and spinach. So those are going to be our vegetable bases for our kind of our things. And we're going to do tomato paste to kind of thicken up our sauce. So let's since our onions are starting to be translucent, we're going to cut in our Italian sausage. Now I find just get good kitchen shears and we'll snip it in. You could also use ground, Italian sausage, but this is going to give you little like sausage meatballs almost. Because they'll stay kind of together in their form. I don't cut them too big because, again, if you cut them really big, that's a huge, piece of meat that you'll have to try to navigate. So just little snips here. And this is just a mild Italian sausage, and we're just going to saute and cook these up. This is going to add flavor to the broth of the soup, plus give you just a nice little sausage bite.
Fresh or frozen?
This is actually fresh Italian sausage. This is from my Costco. So it's just one of those big, packs of it. And I always kind of divide it up. So this is fresh because I just bought it, but I do have now a couple packs in the freezer to use later. And then I have saved them because I think I'll make spaghetti and meatballs sometime this week. There we go. One of those meals that or a variation of spaghetti and meatballs that Evie asks for that meal all the time. Okay.
Ravioli.
Oh, I should make ravioli. I haven't made that in a while. And I always typically make my homemade meatballs with ravioli. Okay. I'm going to just pat those down. We'll let those start to kind of cook up. I'm going to turn my Dutch oven down to like a 4 or 5. I've got a smaller Dutch oven, so that will cooks a little bit faster. We're going to start pushing our apples into our base. This is going to be for our apple butter while our sausage and onions are sauteing over there for our tortellini soup. There we go. I'm just going to make sure everything gets kind of coated up in this sugar. There we go. And then we'll start kind of pushing it down. As it, again, starts to get nice and hot, these apples will sweat out more of their liquid and reduce down. I'm going to add in my lemon for this. Let me just pick out a couple of seeds. I always find that sometimes you get a lemon that has like 100 seeds on it, and sometimes you get one that has none. But I do really feel like nowadays our lemons are just so much more full of seeds than they used to be. I don't ever remember having that many seeds in lemons. One time I had one and I think I counted 43 lemon seeds. It was like all seeds. Okay, we're going to squeeze in this lemon juice too for it. I'm just making sure. I'm squeezing it upside down. That way if I see a lemon seed, I can pop it out before it falls in. There we go. This one. So you want the juice from one fresh lemon. And I will say fresh is much better than if you use, that true lemon or the lemon, base. It's just not as good. Oh, there we go. Where is this guy? Got him. Okay. Got to get those lemon seeds out because I don't want to blend them up in when we puree this into a nice kind of, paste. Here we go. So again, I'm going to pat these down. And let's give our Italian sausages a little bit of a stir here. While we're waiting for that to cook up, let's start prepping up our vegetables. I have one small zucchini here that we're going to put in the soup because it just plays really well with, the Italian sausage and the tortellini. I'm going to cut it in half. That way we won't have just big discs in our soup, more manageable pieces. If you have a thicker one, you'll probably want to quarter it instead of just have it. But this is a pretty small zucchini. There we go. Zucchini is a great way to add a little extra fiber to your soup, but it actually just soaks up the flavors of what you're cooking. So it doesn't have a lot of flavor on its own. So it's just nice that way to sneak in some extra veggies. Let's get some baby bellas sliced up.
Your question is the zucchini from your garden?
It is not. I do not grow zucchini. I've done it before, but zucchini grows, it's a vine one, so it takes up a lot of space. And I typically do cucumbers because that takes up a lot of space. And I don't have a very big garden. But, I always sit there and I'm like, I've always wanted to do one of those squash trellises, where you grow the squash over your head. And I feel like one day I'll get to it. I tried to do it a couple years ago with my cucumbers. I only got them to grow up like right here. It was, was hoping, but maybe one day. I do have some pumpkins outside growing right now, but I don't know if they're going to make it. Okay, let's get our sausage. We'll let those saute. And here we can see our apples are starting to get a nice, you can see the steam come up and a little bit of our boil coming in here. There we go. So I'm just going to keep just pushing all of these apples down below that liquid so that, again, they can get nice and tender for it. Okay. Our sausage looks like it's just about ready to be kind of cooked through. So we're going to add in our zucchini. We'll let that start to saute up. Almost overboard. And then we'll add in our mushroom. If you were going to use like peppers or carrots or celery, you would add those in first and let them, soak. But I'm sticking with more like lighter vegetables for this instead of those heartier ones in there. Okay, I've got 3 tomatoes here. These are not from my garden because my tomatoes are all still green. They've been green for a month. They just don't want to turn colors for me. So one day I'll wake up and I'll have lots of tomatoes, but they've been, tricking. And I will say, I probably have like 50 or 60 cherry tomatoes that will probably be, I'm hoping, in a week or two. And then I have, I think, like 20 actual good sized tomatoes, but they're all still very green.
A lot of people saying fried green tomatoes.
I know. I was thinking about it because I do love a fried green tomato, and it really reminds me of this crazy movie that I'm not sure very many people have seen, but it's called Fried Green Tomatoes with like Kathy Bates in it from the 90s. It's a murder mystery. It's a good movie. Here we go. So we're going to chop up our tomatoes, and you could also use a can of, diced tomatoes, but I always love using fresh produce whenever I can. I just feel like it makes things fresher. Just with the tomatoes, you want them to where you've cut your skin up into smaller pieces, because just like with apples, your tomato skin isn't going to, disintegrate. What will happen is it will like kind of curl up. So as long as you cut it into smaller pieces, you don't have to do the painstaking process of like steaming them and then peeling it. Okay. Let's give this a good stir.
A lot of the chat agrees with you. Great movie.
Good. See, you know what? It is. I know it's probably the older generations that have get it because I think I watched it with my mom, but it was a good movie. Here we go. Let's pop that down. There, you can already tell they're starting to get a little bit soft because they're getting less white looking, like less opaque, and more getting that transition like a kind of a lighter brown. Okay, let's add in our mushrooms real quick. We'll let those saute up, and then we're going to add in our spices before we add in our tomatoes for our creamy tortellini soup. So far, we've got our Italian sausage, onions, mushrooms, and zucchini in here. And we'll make a kind of a nice creamy tomato broth with our tomatoes and some tomato paste. But let's season this guy up first. We're just going to keep it really simple and use some Italian spices. We're going to use about, I want to say, a teaspoon and a half, a good amount to kind of really season up the flavor of it. I'm going to use a little bit of onion powder, about a teaspoon. That will give it just a nice savour flavor to the broth. Sprinkle over. And then we'll just use a smidge of garlic salt, just about a half a teaspoon. And then let me grab a spoon because we're going to use about a little bit of garlic too. Oh, my apples are boiling over here. I'm going to turn these guys down now that we've got a good boil on it. And they can start to simmer. That's the nice thing, is cooking it in my Dutch oven is going to keep this heat really steady and lovely. The reason why you want to put in about a cup of liquid, I use apple cider instead of just trying to do it with the natural juices of it, is because we do put the sugar in from it. And if you don't put in any extra liquid, that sugar will turn to like a caramel, and we don't want it to turn to a caramel. We want it to be nice and juicy before we start our reduction. Okay, I'm going to slide just to make a spot so I can put my garlic straight on the pan here so it can have a chance to saute up. So just make a basin in there. And I'm going to put in just about a teaspoon of garlic, and we'll let that saute in that spot for a little bit. I'm not mixing in my spices yet because I want them to kind of steam up first. I always find the steam, just letting them sit there with the natural steam from the vegetables, allows the spices to rehydrate, and I feel like they make them softer and blend in and bring out more of their flavor. Okay. Let's get our green onions prepped because we'll throw these in. I'm going to throw my whiter parts in now, but then my darker parts of my green onions we'll put in later towards the end, kind of as a garnish on it. But this will add a really lovely, fresh kind of green onion flavor. But I find that the whiter or the pale green parts need a little bit of cooking time. So we're going to throw these in. And then I'm going to mix up those spices. And then we'll add our tomato paste in before we add in our tomatoes. Here. You can really smell those Italian spices now. Okay. Let's get our tomato paste. I always have the hardest time with the little cans. They never want to completely open. Most of the time, you know, I buy mine in a little tube because I love the tomato paste in the tube, but I needed a little bit more, a good amount in this, so I wanted to use a can. We're gonna put in, because I'm gonna use this to make my my tomato broth with it. This is about 1/4 of a cup of tomato paste. And this is when tomato paste is essentially, you know, tomatoes that have been reduced down. So when we add in our chicken bouillon, that's going to give us a really rich kind of tomatoey flavor to our broth, but not using like a sauce.
Yeah, question. What type of meat?
I have Italian sausage in here. You can see these little balls that I snipped up using scissors, and then we cooked them in here. So that will just kind of give a nice Italian flavor to it, and I feel like it will just give a good texture too, because it will stay like almost like a little meatball. Okay, we've got our tomato paste cooking up here, and you can see I always like to cook it because once we add in our tomatoes, it's going to let out a lot of juice, but this will really allow that tomato flavor to really bring in some richness. Okay, let's add in our 3 diced up tomatoes, or chopped up. It's not really a dice since they're kind of a big chop on them. And now these tomatoes will start to let out a little bit more liquid. They're looking delicious. And I want them to saute up for just about a minute or two because you want them to kind of sweat out their things before we put our broth in. Let's check over here at our apples. You can see we've got just this lovely kind of a spiced apple broth, if you want to say, with that brown sugar and the cinnamon in here. And once we've got they're almost done. I'm looking for all of them to have more of this kind of darker brown color, and then we'll puree them and start that reduction for our apple butter.
You have a question? Have you ever made wedding soup?
Yeah, Italian wedding soup. Yes, I made it. I feel like in the spring with the little, you know, teeny like meatballs, and it's a delicious soup. So yes, I have. I can't. It was a while ago, but yes, I've definitely made that, and it is delicious. Okay, let's pat these guys down. And let's add in our broth. We'll add once we get our broth up into a boil, we'll add our tortellini. But you want to add the tortellini at the very end because tortellini only needs like 3 minutes to cook, and you don't want it to get too mushy. So I have about 4 cups of water, and then we'll add in a big scoop of chicken bouillon. I'm going to add in a little bit of it at first. So I've added in about a cup, and we're going to just mix this around and kind of what I call deglazing the pan. So just scrape your spoon across the bottom of the pan to pick up any of those spices that have, you know, stuck down, any of those tasty little bits. Here we go. And I like to just do a little bit of liquid at a time because I feel like it melds it together instead of flooding it. It just allows the sauce to kind of really come together lovely. Here we go. There. Beautiful. So again, we do have this just rich kind of tomato base. We'll add in a little bit of cream to make it a creamier tomato base sauce. Now you could always keep it with a regular one, but I feel like with the tortellini, the cream will help it kind of coat up nicely. I've got my chicken bouillon, which I like to use over chicken broth because I find that store-bought chicken broth is really bland. So unless you've got the time to make it yourself, I feel like this gives you a little bit more flavor. We're going to put in about a tablespoon of this, so just a good scoop. This is going to give the saltiness to our soup, as well as give those nice kind of chicken undernotes. You could also use a vegetable broth if you wanted to as well. And we're going to let that simmer for just a second here. I'm going to taste it, see if we need to add anything else. Delicious. It has that nice kind of Italian seasoning undernotes to it, but it doesn't taste like a spaghetti. You know, a lot of times I've known people who will do like a marinara sauce mixed with broth to make their like tomato base, but that I always feel like has too much sweetness in it. But this is delicious. Okay, before we get to blending this up, let's get our melts kind of going because they take a minute to cook up. I've got my sourdough bread left over. You know, let me first clear this area off. I'll slide this, get my apple cider out of the way. And we got our sourdough bread from last night. I'll take it out so you can marvel at the beauty of it. It was a really nice one, although it took me forever to kind of squeeze this in here. But look at the beautiful crumb on that guy. And just look how soft he still is. We baked this up last night with our dinner. Okay, let me pull these guys out of the way. That way we have a little bit of space, and then we'll build. We're just going to do a really simple kind of salami, pepperoni, havarti cheese melt, which will go well with the soup. Because soup and sandwich, it would be nice to dip it in the tomato-based soup of it. Okay. And a little bit of red onion because red onion and pepperoni work well together. Let me grab my bread knife. And let's cut our slices here. I'm going to have to, apparently I did not cut this very even last night. So I'm going to even it up because you don't want to have when you're making grilled cheese, that slice needs to be almost as even as possible. Otherwise, what will happen is it'll toast up on the ridges, but not so much for the sandwich. Here we go. And let's get, and I will say one thing I love, I always make a really big sourdough loaf for us instead of a smaller one at dinner because I really enjoy making grilled cheese sandwiches or melts or croutons or whatnot with the leftovers in case it doesn't get eaten all the way up. Let's give our soup over here a quick stir. Lovely. And we'll spread on a little bit of butter for our things. You want to let me grab just a little bit. You don't need much on just one side of each slice of bread. The part that's going to be toasted up on the griddle here. That way you've got that nice kind of crispy edge for your grilled cheese. That's why I always have room temperature butter out. I feel like you grew up either having butter out on the counter or not. I did not grow up with butter out on the counter, but my husband, his family always had like a butter dish. And it really makes a difference having soft butter versus cold butter out of the fridge. Here we go. Okay, we're going to use havarti on here because havarti, you could also use mozzarella, provolone, any white creamier based cheese, maybe Gouda would even works well with salami, pepperoni because they're a bit more spicy. You're not going to want to use like a cheddar cheese or one, those stronger flavored cheeses. You want one that's a bit more mellow because you've got more seasoning in your meats. I'm going to turn this down to a nice low simmer. And the beauty I love about using havarti on kind of grilled cheeses and whatnot is it's a really soft cheese, which means it's going to melt up really, really nicely and give you that ooey gooey delicious cheese pull that makes, grilled cheese is so delicious.
Yeah, question. What are your thoughts on using mayo rather than butter?
So I actually used to use mayo on like when I had to prepare a lot of grilled cheeses. If I'm making a large group, I've done the mayo before. And I've done it where you've done it in the oven where it crisps up. And I find it's good, but I feel like it's a bit more greasy. So I prefer the butter because I think the butter gives a nice crunch that has that natural flavor to it. Where mayo, I think, gives you just a greasier sandwich. It's great in a pinch if you don't have butter or anything else, but I definitely prefer butter over it. We're gonna do our kind of nice layer of salami here. And so I'll make sure there's going to be the one that I make for myself, and then there's the one that will be for my husband. This one's for my husband, meaning it's going to have twice as much salami because he likes a very meat-filled sandwich. I prefer a thin layer that gives you just a nice little, taste to it. So growing up, my mother's from Sweden and we always ate more like European style. And one of my favorite breakfasts, which is not common at all here, is just like toast with a slice of cheese and a slice of like salami on it. And it is just so delicious. Or just, bread with a slice of cheese. I love there for like just a simple breakfast. It's not common here as much, but it's one of my favorite things. I did a foreign exchange to Germany when I was in high school, and they lived in this tiny town. It's called Kirschguns, which had about I want to say 900 people in it. So a really, really small town. But the town had a butcher, a baker, and a bank, not a candlestick maker. But they had fresh bread delivered to their house every single day. And for breakfast, I would have this pumpkin seed brötchen, which it means like a little roll, with like salami and cheese on it. And then for school, my my German mom, I would say, but my foreign exchange student's mother, she would pack me that with a sandwich, then pumpkin seed with Nutella and peanut butter because I love peanut butter, and peanut butter is not common in Europe at all. But that was always my snack from school there because they didn't serve lunches at school. And so, just gotta love the salami based thing for it. Okay, let's get these last ones on. We'll start toasting them up. Then we'll finish off with our soup and finish off with the next part of our apple butter because then it's just the boring reducing time.
You have a request in the future to make some of your childhood favorites?
Oh, yes, I will have to. During the holidays, I do make a lot more of those, like my Swedish meatballs and my saffron bread. Those are like traditional with Santa Lucia. But yes, I will have to do some of that. Although I say growing up, we ate a lot of soups and stews because I am from a big family, and both my parents were pretty busy workers, and so they did a lot of crock pot meals. I definitely eat more bougie, and I will say I started taking over cooking for my family when I was 13. So, although there are a couple things that were always hit home, it's like this. It's called yellow chicken. It's a very mild curry dish, and it is so simple, but it is one of my favorite dishes. Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay, let's get our skillet here toasting up for our sandwiches. I'm going to give this a quick stir. We are going to add in our spinach and our tortellini, but at the very end, and a little bit of cream. But let's take a look at our apples here because they look like they are soft enough for me to puree, and then we'll kind of begin our reduction time for that. Okay. I realized I was going to put red onions on those sandwiches, but not today. Okay, nice and hot. Let's move this over here to make it a little bit easier. I really like using a Dutch oven for this process over like a metal pan because it's going to keep that heat very even and at a medium temperature so it doesn't scald or burn up when we get down to a lower base. And And it's nice when it has a handle like a pan, because then I can just pour this all in here. I'm just gonna really scoop around the sides. And then we're gonna puree this up, and then it's gonna go right back in there to start reducing. And this is going to make our delicious kind of cinnamon spiced apple butter that we'll have with our cinnamon roll sourdough tonight. I'm actually going to do it on the soup setting because this is a hot base for here, and this is my like Vitamix. But that way we'll start it low and then push it up. In just a second. With the soup setting, it starts it low, and then in a second it's going to go up high. So. Perfect. So technically you have applesauce right now for this, slightly thing. But the difference I will say between apple butter and applesauce is you puree it a little bit longer so it's just super thin. And then we're going to cook it and reduce it down to where it's like half this amount. That way it will be a silky, smooth, rich apple butter.
Do you have a question? Do you think the Vitamix is worth the cost over something cheaper like a Ninja?
You know what? I have a Ninja over there, and I love my Ninja. I have the small Ninja one. I don't have the big blender, and I like the small Ninja for that. I will say the Vitamix does cook, or not does cook, does blend really, really smooth and really fine. And you can do, I feel like you can do nuts and make your own flours with it. So it has a really powerful engine that allows you to work really well with it. And so I really like it. Let me turn this guy down even low and turn it off because we've got to simmer it or it's going to splatter everywhere. But I have to say, I do find that it's worth it because it has such a great strong motor on it versus I feel like with my Ninja, sometimes it won't blend everything and you'll get chunks to it. So I have to say, I am a big fan of it. But is it going to, if you don't have the money to spend on it, a Ninja is a really, really great option. I will say, because I've gone through actually 2 of these little Ninjas over there. The ones my kids use it all the time. It's really easy for them. So I really like that, and it has a good powerful blend thing on it. Let's check this guy out. Let's do our flip over here. Ooh, that one got a little bit more toasty than I expected. That's okay. I bet you it's because it's on part of that burner over there. We'll just keep it slightly turned, but not too bad. Okay, let's give our soup a little stir here. We're going to throw in our spinach, and then we're going to add in our zucchini, or not our zucchini, our tortellini. It all sounds the same here. So I've got about, I want to say it was not quite a half a bag of baby spinach left, but about a cup. And we're going to throw this in here, and we're going to let this kind of, stir up here for just a second. Let it bring down. And, that will just allow it to like really get a nice kind of, softness to it. Spinach is going to really like wilt up pretty quickly. Let's add our tortellini in here. Now this is going to cook up and it will be about soft and ready in about 3 minutes. Now with tortellini, do not put too much in here. This is going to expand and it's going to suck up a lot of our liquid. I'm going to add cream in here at the end, which will give us a little bit more liquid to the base. But again, I think a mistake is a lot of people put too much in and it's more like you have a pasta.
Yeah, question. Are you using cheese tortellini?
I am. I'm using, it's good old Costco's cheese, Parmesan tortellini, but you could really use Italian sausage or any tortellini base that you want. Although I would avoid like the lobster or the ones because they'd be a bit too, like sweet for this. Okay. Let me grab my cream out of the fridge here. That is not right here. I've got a little and a little. And let's chop up our green onions. And again, we'll add these green onions at the very end to our soup. You just don't want it to put it in too soon or they'll get mushy and they'll lose all their flavors. You want them to be like a really bright spot. Now, you could also use, fresh basil or parsley to add in at the very end as well. Let's see if these guys are ready for their next flip. Okay, good. I like to do 2 flips, one on each side. That way it will allow it to kind of cook up and get a nice, good crispiness to it. And now let's keep an eye. Here is our apple butter.
You have a question? Do you have the recipe for the soup posted?
So we will upload the video to the link on our page so you can always rewatch and create it. All of our live streams, we do upload our videos to it so that people can always recreate our recipes. Now, I do send out recipe cards about for our members. I make a post about once a week with 3 recipe cards in it. And those, we send out big, but everybody has access to the videos on there. So everybody can always recreate from this. There we go.
You have a question. Is apple butter basically just a thicker version of applesauce?
Yes. And you can flavor it up and whatnot, but yes, it's essentially you've reduced your applesauce down so much to form a really, really dense kind of thicker paste. Basically, it's a bit smoother and silkier because it's been cooked longer. Applesauce has a little bit of grit to it. Apple butter would be really smooth on it. And that's just from that cooking for a lot longer, and it's a bit sweeter, more flavorful. But it is essentially applesauce that has been cooked down and down and down. Now you need to definitely use some lemon juice in there for it to kind of give you that nice body that a lot of jams have and jellies have, whatnot. But you don't need to put in like a pectin or anything or make a jelly out of it. It's really just, a puree that has been like a compote, like an apple compote, essentially. Okay.
Have you ever thought about being a culinary teacher?
I've thought about it. In my past life, I actually was a teacher. I worked with children and children with special needs for several years up until I had Teddy, 4 years ago. And then I decided I wanted to stay home for a little while because I'd been working and working. So I do love teaching, and that's kind of where I have this show. I feel like I get to teach everybody without all the pressures of, the world and whatnot. This is fun. To show you guys what we're making while we cook. We're going to add in our cream here. I'm going to put in about a 1/3 cup. I don't feel like you need to add a whole lot of cream to this to get that creamy flavor. I feel like a lot of times when people make creamy soups, they use a lot more cream than that is necessary. And a little bit goes a long way. And you've got to use heavy cream because if you use half and half, you're not going to get that creamy flavor. So you're going to end up using more and more, which will make it a bit more liquidy. Let's see how these are going. Looking good. Okay. Beautiful. So just so right now, as you see, right now we clearly have, if you were to eat this, it would be a pretty sweet applesauce because we add a lot more sugar in it before the apple butter. But as you see, we've got just this nice runny consistency to it. Here we go. Now I'm going to just taste up my broth here, and then I think we're going to be just about ready to kind of serve up. Delicious. So let's toss in our green onions. And again, you could use fresh parsley or basil if you wanted a slightly. Parsley will give you more of that fresh, like herby flavor. Basil will give you that nice, strong kick to it. And let me grab, because this soup is great with some grated Parmesan cheese. So when we're ready to serve up, let's get this ready. So we'll have that. Let me check on my melts over here. See how these are. We are getting there. Look at that nice cheese pull already. That's from the havarti. It's just such a nice creamy one. Okay, I'm going to turn these guys off. And let's get ready to serve up. I'm going to bring my apple butter again down to a nice low. And let's grab our bowl. We'll do for this. Okay. I'm going to slide this off. I always say if you're making like an apple butter or any type of thing that's really dense like this, do it in the Dutch oven because it's going to keep it hot, but you minimal amount of heat on there. Otherwise, what happens is it bubbles over. Okay. Let's get our sandwich. I'm going to slide this over so we'll be ready. Turn that off. Let me grab a ladle for our soup. Okay, let's start out here with our Italian melt. We've got our salami, pepperoni, havarti cheese on our homemade sourdough bread. And we've got this just our lovely cheese that's already oozing and gooing in there. And this will be delicious to dip into our soup. Today we made a homemade creamy tortellini soup with a rich tomato broth using fresh tomatoes and tomato paste. We've got Italian sausage, zucchini, green onions, and Italian spices. But that broth has just got that creamy tomato flavor to it, which is so well with the kind of cheese tortellini. And then we also made, I almost forgot our delicious cheese. This is what's going to make the tortellini soup even better. Just freshly grated Parmesan cheese over the top for that extra little cheesiness to it, adds a little bit of salt. And then, of course, tonight we will be having our apple butter once it's kind of reduced down with our homemade sourdough that we're going to be baking up. We have a cinnamon roll sourdough for dinner tonight. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can go to that link, search for what we made, our tortellini soup and our apple butter, and you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. We've got our Hexclad skillet in here. I've got my Dutch ovens, my cutting boards, my knives, all the different gadgets I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out in case you're interested. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.